I'm going to talk a little bit about the Civic Engagement program in Belfast, but I don't want to talk about it because it's not in the United States. I think the same issues are at play, but it maybe puts them in a slightly different light. And I think, you know, responding a little bit to Eric, I mean, I feel like you need to go to the Duke Engage Academy to have your expectations lowered, because I think it's one of the things here is we want so much out of these programs, but in fact we're always having to lower expectations for what we can really achieve and what is this really. You know, we have this little moment, this little blip in the lives of these students, and we have to understand that, you know, there's everything is outside our control, including that photograph there is totally outside my control. So I mean that but the idea is that, you know, we should be thinking about this in a deep and complicated way, but on the other hand, I think we also have to understand that we're operating in a very small way in some ways in some students' lives, big way in other students' lives, but small way in most students' lives. Anyway, just a quick little thing on Irish history. It's a predominantly Protestant part of the UK. With a Catholic minority, and that Catholic minority was for centuries oppressed, prevented from getting housing, prevented from getting jobs, chronically poor, chronically sick, and shut out of many just basic services. In some ways inspired, in lots of ways, directly inspired by the civil rights movement in the United States. The Catholic population, with some Protestant support, began to protest peacefully for equal rights within Northern Ireland. And the culmination of that period was 1972, when they had the big civil rights march in the city of Derry, using the same slogans as the civil rights movement in the US, the same songs, the same handbooks, the same everything. But what was different in that particular case was British paratroopers who fired on the marchers, killing over a dozen people. That's Bloody Sunday that U2 sings about. And that was the beginning of what's called the Troubles in Northern Ireland, which is essentially a two-level war. One part of it was the British occupation of Northern Ireland, and the second part was a guerrilla conflict between the Irish Republican Army, which is pro-Union, pro-Republic of Ireland, predominantly Catholic, and the loyalist paramilitaries, who are Protestant and maintaining the connection to the UK. One of the big figures in my generation, one of the big figures political figures in my youth was a guy named Bobby Sands, who was an IRA member who was in prison, but he ran for Parliament while he was in prison and won. So he became a sitting member of Parliament in the UK. And that was at the time when Maggie Thatcher was Prime Minister. In 1998, there was a peace agreement called the Good Friday Accords, which ended sort of the formal period of violence. But Belfast, in particular, Northern Ireland in general, remains a deeply divided society between Protestant and Catholic. 98% of kids go to segregated schools. 98% of people live in segregated neighborhoods. There's walls that divide these neighborhoods. You shop in a segregated store, you go to the gym and you work out in a segregated gym. Obviously you go to segregated, you know, religious whatever services. No one really goes to church, but you identify, you know, separately. So it's an incredibly divided society today. At the time when the Good Friday Accords were signed, I think there were 19 what they call peace walls in Belfast. Now there's more than 80. So segregation is increasing in Northern Ireland. I don't know if I want students to come out of this being political, because I feel in a way too humble to know what, you know, these wonderful kids, what are they going to do with their lives? You know, I'm just as happy to have the future stockbroker, you know, the future stockbroker or whatever in my group as to have the future activist. But what I want them to come away with is with a stronger sense of critical thinking. Because I think you can read as much as you want in the classroom, but until you actually confront some of these issues in real life, I think you have a kind of a tourist knowledge and of the world. And I think, you know, a valuable part for me of Duke Engage is to deepen that critical thinking and deepen that complexity, while at the same time giving students this ability to go to a place like this. But you know, the lessons that they learn here are equally applicable to Durham, I would say, in many ways. There are walls in Durham. They're just not very high. You know, they're the walls that are across the street. And so, you know, Chicago is equally as segregated as Belfast, but there's just not a wall. So I think that would be the way I'd end.
Thank you very much. This really